a bride-to-be's happiest moment.
We were having a good time planning. We went and picked out dresses together.
What could possibly go wrong? A dead body in the kitchen.
We got one down, shell casing on the floor.
3 suspects to look out for. Investigators trying to get answers.
Susan seemed a little too laid back, just laughing and joking around in the interview room. Some of that stuff didn't really make sense when...
Will detectives apprehend the cold-blooded killer, or will the culprit walk away freely?
And he texted me, don't be late, whatever.
Don't be late to
8 o'clock. We were gonna meet up at Home Depot.
Which one?
In Dallas.
You won't believe what happens next. In an instant, a joyous occasion turns into a nightmare. On the afternoon of November 13th, 2015, Rolette police received this chilling call. A man had just discovered a terrifying scene right in the kitchen. He couldn't catch a glimpse of what had transpired. Can you imagine the horror?
Yeah, I need an ambulance. I just shut up and I went to the kitchen and I saw blood. She laid on the kitchen floor.
However, the dispatcher tries to get information from the caller to make sense of the shocking call and give the officers an idea of what they are about to walk into, but they weren't ready for it.
Okay. She's not moving?
Okay.
What is your name?
My name is Brian.
Hold on just a minute. Let me get some help going, okay?
But when the officers arrived at the scene, they could not behold the amount of horror staring at them. A 37-year-old lady was lying dead on the floor of her kitchen. The air was thick with dread as officers took in the sight. Grillo had sustained a gunshot wound to the head, but that was not all. Even more terrifying was the fact that they found a .45 caliber shell chase near her body.
Wound to the head, focus, drops of blood.
God. Purse being right there next to her. I'm wondering if she just got here.
She was shot one time in the eyebrow, and she died right there.
Every detail pointed to a meticulously planned crime. Now, officers must first figure out what led to the woman's death in her own kitchen. So they resolved to search the apartment, which had become a crime scene. Despite the thorough search carried out at Grillo's house, officers could not find any obvious indication of a forced entry. But, however, just inside the master bedroom, police found something very surprising that piqued their interest and was about to change everything.
As we were searching the master bedroom, we observed some drawers flipped over, and the safe was actually open, where it looked like possibly a burglary had occurred.
But there were things inside the scene that just didn't look right. We did not find any forced entry to the residence at all, and the rest of the home appeared to be untouched. This did not appear to us to be a random attack. Somebody wanted her dead.
On the other hand, about 20 minutes after police arrived at the scene, Laura's fiancé, John Macris, shows up. John and Laura were volunteers for the police department, and this made John familiar with the officers. Notice how calm he is. He, however, engaged in a discussion with one of the officers, intending to know what had happened to his fiancée.
Listen to me. It looks like a gunshot wound. That is all I can tell you. You have cameras on the house? Yes. Do they record?
They used to. I don't know if they do.
Okay.
His demeanor seemed calm, almost too calm for someone who just lost a loved one. In the meantime, investigators were able to determine that Laura Grillo was killed that morning, and no other victims were found, which only made their theory that whosoever came to the house didn't come for anything else but Grillo. As the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together, tension mounted.
New information from Rowlett where neighbors are in disbelief.
Meanwhile, the Rowlett Police Department detectives who arrived at the scene theorized Grillo's murder could have been the result of a robbery gone wrong, but soon their investigation only zeroed in on a killer closer to home. Who could it be?
We just got an update from Rowlett Police about 30 minutes ago, and they tell us the death investigation that's happening just behind us here inside this home is now considered a homicide.
With no signs of a forced entry, investigators say on Friday morning either someone followed Laura into her home or was already inside when she returned home from taking her children to school.
Due to the fact that investigators were eager to get answers, Grillo's brother, Brian Millionaire, who had been living with her, Macris, and Grillo's 3 children, who also made the 911 call at the time of the murder, was first interviewed. However, he told police he had been asleep all morning and that he had woken up and found the body, but he had never heard the gunshot, or did he? What is he hiding?
He got up about noon and he found the female body face down in the kitchen. A lot of blood. He exited the house and called 911, and we were able to confirm. So Brian was eliminated as a suspect. We didn't find any motive. There was nothing but love between Laura and Brian.
With this, detectives were able to rule out Grillo's brother from the equation, but they had one person who might be helpful with information, and that was Grillo's fiancé, John Macris. While Macris was taken in for questioning, Laura Grillo's best friend, neighbor Grace, picked up Laura's 3 children from school and took them to her house.
Children, they were staying the night with me. They couldn't go back home, of course. And then that's when John was at the police station being questioned.
Drama in the interrogation room. The plot thickens. However, detectives took an empathetic approach to try and gain his cooperation, and also to know where he was at the time of murder, but they were baffled at the drama Macris put up.
Just got off phone with the police officers and detectives at the scene. I'm sorry for your loss. I want you to know that we're going to find out what happened.
When we started the interview, he cried quietly for about 60 seconds.
What would be the motive for someone to come in the house, attack Laura? No idea.
After giving him a chance to let out all of his emotions, it was time for the officers to get some information from Macris.
Somebody chose to come in that house. But why? That's what we're going to find out. Did Laura receive any bad news? Rosie? You know the mind on this. Okay, everything was good. I understand y'all know a lady coming out. Yes.
And that he had met up with 2 workers in his construction business.
Macris finally tells the officers that on the morning of the shooting, he and Grillo had left the house at about the same time, and that he went to a Home Depot in Dallas County where he met his 2 employees, Jesus Trevino and James Villada, to pick up supplies for his home remodeling business. The details seemed almost rehearsed. Officers were amazed how someone who had just lost a loved one could remember such detailed information.
We have to give them some time, a day or 2 to collect themselves.
However, officers couldn't get any substantial information after the interview with John Macris. They needed to find out who had murdered Laura, and they had to put 1 and 2 together to unfold this shocking mystery. An unexpected twist awaits. Fortunately for the officers, they had an unexpected guest in their office, and this really made a huge step in finding who the culprit was.
Everybody's asking me what's going on. My answer is I don't know. I still don't know.
John wanted to know more about the case. He questioned the officers what their next step would be. He just sits in the interrogation room and wants to be in charge of the case. But then, the officers saw this as an opportunity to get as much information as they could from him.
I need answers. Okay. I need to know what is going on. What is your speculations? What?
The fact that his fiance that he was supposed to marry in a week is dead. He's more concerned about wanting to clean everything up and move on with his life.
What's his next move? Meanwhile, a few days after the incident, Macris's actions and behavior become weird, and he says the most unthinkable thing to Grace, Laura's friend. Surprisingly, just 3 days after Laura was killed, John Macris informs the police that he will no longer see them without his attorney being present. Nevertheless, officers were able to gather surveillance footage of Macris from a couple of home improvement stores so as to get more information.
And we were able to confirm that a short time later, he had met up with 2 workers in his construction business.
Jesus worked with John, and they were best friends. He was going to be part of the wedding party.
With each clue, the tension rose, and so did the stakes. Unsure of John's motive, officers opted to think out of the box as they researched through the employees John had met with at the time of the murder and called them in for formal questioning. In this case, officers use a friendly demeanor with both men to make them comfortable to get information from them. Their goal was to find out if they were a person of interest or a suspect.
What happened?
just started holding doors. Okay. He pulled up and
He, me and
John
okay.
John showed up and everything. We started working. Yeah. Okay.
Very cooperative, very talkative. The stories matched.
They both said they were together the entire morning, and both James and Jesus denied being in Rowlett that morning.
However, both men seemed very cooperative and willing to share some information that corroborated what John had told them.
If that's what y'all wondering, if he could have done it, I don't see it him doing it. He's an ass.
The officer's suspicion deepened. That was the answer Jesus gave. While he laid back in the interrogation room joking around, officers thought that maybe he could be... The officers, however, suspect Trevini was involved in the murder. This led them to run a GPS tracking system on his cell phone to ascertain if their speculations were indeed correct.
What we found is about 8:26, he pinged a tower in Rowlett.
Interestingly, officers spotted something striking about Jesus' cell phone that they weren't expecting. Finally, the officers had gotten a lead, and they were going to find out who actually was responsible for Grillo's murder. As they delve deeper into searching for a motive, they discover a dark truth that Laura was in an unsettling relationship with her fiancé, John Macris.
It was a little surprising when she accepted his proposal. There were actually several times when Laura was thinking about leaving John. The last time I spoke with Laura was the night before she was murdered.
We found out that John wanted out of the relationship with Laura, but he also was trying to maintain possession of his daughter.
A disturbing revelation. November 19th, 2015, the GPS tracking, however, showed that John Macris's employee and best friend, Emmanuel Jesus Trevino, was within a mile of Laura Grillo's house at about the same time of the murder. Was this the break they needed? Could Jesus be the killer, or is this just a coincidence? Nevertheless, detectives wanted to verify this information and thus called John's other employee, James Vilda, back in for questioning. But this time, officers decided to take a more confrontational approach to the interrogation.
I have proof that he was not at your place that early.
That's what time he was at my place.
I'm telling you, I've analyzed everything. He was not there.
In any interview, we've got to get that person to understand that we do know more than what we're leading on. And we explained what the penalties are for, murder, and he could spend the rest of his life in prison.
Officers were making sure that James understood they knew he was lying to them. But however, he kept on repeating the same thing. They had to enlighten him about the penalty for being an accomplice, which got him acting nervously.
Helps build rapport, and if you have rapport with somebody, it makes it more difficult for them to lie to you.
If we gave you a polygraph today and I asked you, do you have knowledge or did you participate in the taking of the life of Laura? Yes or no? What would you answer? No.
James continued to tell detectives he knows nothing about the murder, but the officers think otherwise and does not have enough evidence to nail James, so they let him go. Detectives didn't end there. One of the officers drove James to his motel and asked for permission to search his apartment. What they found was astonishing. However, the officers discovered something shocking.
So that gave us even more suspicion that now we're on to the right people.
This gave the officers assurance that they were up on the right people. Meanwhile, officers decided to look for Macris, but just then, they discovered he was nowhere to be found. They needed to keep James in check so he wouldn't run away as well, and that was when they charged him for what they saw.
We briefly spoke to RJ on Texas Rangers.
Meanwhile, by digging into both men's pasts, investigators shockingly learned they were both convicted sex offenders, and that Trevino was a previously deported felon who was back in the U.S. illegally. A month after Grillo's murder, James was interrogated once more by one of the officers alongside a Texas Ranger. James seemed really intrigued to see a real-life Texas Ranger, and the officer hoped that his admiration for the Texas Ranger would prompt him to tell the truth.
Interested in games at this point. We're way too far into this, and this is not something that you want to get in the middle of by trying to cover for anybody.
I know. I've been trying to go over it more and more in case y'all come to talk to me, because I want to help out as much as I can.
Although James knew this was a serious situation, the officer and Texas Ranger couldn't get him to spill the truth. Eventually, on the 19th of January 2016, the officers tried to track down Jesus once again, hence they executed a search warrant for the latest data from his cell phone. Suddenly, they find calls recorded between Jesus and John Macris on the very same day James Villeda was interrogated by the police, and what happens next, no one was ready for. Both men were concerned about how long the police were holding James down, and on February 16, 2016, the police were certain they could now directly link John Macris to Grillo's murder. But John, on the other hand, refused to cooperate with authorities. And right there in a parking lot, in hopes of catching him off guard, officers confronted John.
For him to say and explain that he was not involved in the murder.
On catching a glimpse of the officers, John is surprised to see them and immediately starts to feel nervous. They got his attention. They played the recorded call between himself and Jesus, his employee, who is now a suspected accomplice.
If you look at everything that we have found out during this investigation, and I'm just being honest with you, okay? It's pointing right back to you and Jesus and James.
I don't know, guys.
I know, but you see how it looks?
I really have no idea. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
As the police keep interrogating him about the recorded conversion, he seems to be very nervous and can't explain it.
Here you go. We're not detaining you. We're not handcuffing you. We just have some questions.
We were able to get in contact with a couple of his ex-girlfriends, a former roommate of his, and these people had direct knowledge about Jesus being hired by John to kill Laura.
However, on the 5th of April, detectives concluded their search for Jesus, who they believed had now fled the state. Meanwhile, detectives were able to contact a couple of Jesus's ex-girlfriends and former roommates. These people obviously had an idea that Jesus was hired by John Macris to kill Laura Grillo.
Also, we were able to get a tip that Jesus was in Florida, and we provided that information to the United States Marshal Service.
The net was closing in. Officers, however, speculated that James Villeda was used as the driver to carry out the murder, while Jesus was hired by John to commit the murder. And finally, detectives got vital information about Jesus being in Florida that was about to change everything. They contacted the state's Marshal Service, and he was apprehended.
Jesus had been arrested, but we still did not have proof that John was an active role co-defendant in the murder of Laura Grillo.
About 5 months after the murder of Laura Grillo, Jesus is brought back to Texas and taken to jail.
And James didn't have as close of a relationship with John that Jesus did. So we felt that James would be the weaker person in that type of a situation to cooperate with us and tell us what he knew about how Laura was killed.
The quest of getting answers continues for detectives as they are willing to make the killer answer for his crime. In any case, they brought James Villeda back to the interrogation room more than 6 months after Grillo's murder. But this time, however, only the Texas Ranger, who specializes in confessions, interrogates James. The Texas Ranger approaches him as a concerned friend, hoping to gain his trust so that he can say something.
You know this young lady? Guess who she dated?
Yes, sir.
Would it surprise you to know that this young lady told us that Jesus talked to her about how he was going to get paid to commit a murder?
The Texas Rangers are legends in Texas, and that had a huge influence on James. But will that get the truth out of him?
He approaches him and offers him some money to drive a car so he can do what? Kill his boss's wife. So you think those two stories are legitimate? I mean, that's a lot to make up.
He understands that now we know a little bit more than we did the last time we sat down.
You don't have to get caught up in this deal. Why should you be worried?
In an actual sense, James understands that the officers knew more than they did the last time he was interrogated. But the best part seems to be how relaxed James was talking with the Texas Ranger, but was he playing the Ranger? For the detectives, this was a plus to get him talking. After so many hours of trying to get the truth out of James, the Texas Ranger promised to help him only if he told the truth. At first, James seemed worried and frightened, but after some hours of deliberation on whether he should tell the truth or not, he finally made up his mind, and what he was about to say was unbelievable.
And when he gets back in the car, what does he say to you? Let's go. That's what he said. Yeah, he shot her. You say how he did it, or? We just shot her.
In the head.
And now he is ready to tell the whole story that played out leading to Grillo's murder.
Right, but it's pretty obvious that John ordered it.
Yeah.
Did Jesus ever say how much John paid him for it?
He was boasting about something about 15 grand.
Were they threatening and all, or just shut up, or were they saying, man, don't talk or else?
I got that vibe from Jesus.
Finally, James admitted that Jesus Trevino killed Laura Grillo after the 9th hour of interrogation.
And James was able to show us several places that evidence was discarded.
Okay.
Interestingly, James helped the detectives in recovering evidence in several places it was discarded.
We entered through a garage where he was doing some work. He was taken to the ground and handcuffed. During the arrest, his glasses fell off.
With James's help, detectives were able to find shoes and a hoodie Jesus discarded while fleeing the crime scene. But however, the murder weapon was never recovered. Closure seemed within reach. Officers ensure John Macris is arrested and taken into custody.
I'm guessing you probably have about 50,000 questions right now in your mind, wondering what's going on. Would I be right with that?
With eager officers wanted to close the case with John's confession, and hence he was taken to the Texas Ranger. While in the interrogation room, Texas Ranger uses the hardline approach.
Let me cut to the chase a little bit. Jesus is a dumbass, all right? At the end of the day, you shouldn't hire a dumbass to do a job because he's going to screw it up, all right? And if he doesn't screw it up, he's going to talk about it.
I didn't hire the dumbass, that's my problem.
Do what?
I did not hire the
Come
dumbass.
on.
I did not pay him any money, that's my problem. I did not want Laura killed.
But John never admits he played a role in the murder of Laura Grillo. However, James agrees to testify in court against John and Jesus. Justice was served, as they were indicted for capital murder.
And both John and Jesus were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And because James did decide to cooperate in this investigation, he was allowed to plead guilty to a murder charge instead of capital murder, and he was sentenced to 25 years. I was glad we were able to hold the individuals responsible, accountable for what they did.
They took a lot away from a lot of people. They took a mother, a friend, a daughter.
Fortunately, both John and Jesus were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
They had been planning this murder for months, and they believed that they had a plan that was going to work. Luckily, in this case, we got justice for Laura Grillo.
Officers were glad to finally apprehend those guilty of Grillo's murder and bring her the justice she deserved. Her absence will be felt most in the lives of her children and the community she has given to.
She's awesome, and she's strong, and she's like her mom. And Laura's always gonna have a place in her heart.